Boom, it's the MMA Underground. Boom, it's the MMA Fight Club podcast up in your life. What up, guys? Coming to you live from the Studio 1B here in the great state of Florida. Everybody's seen the Kimbo Slice fight. If you haven't, I don't recommend you watching it. And I'll say this. Kimbo Slice wins the fight in the third round by a knockout. And apparently, Dada 5000 ends up in the hospital with a cardiac arrest. And they're saying it's due to the fact that he lost 40 pounds of pure body weight to cut to 265. So he's walking around at like 305 or something like that to cut down to 265. That's an outrageous weight cut. And Dada 5000 hasn't fought in MMA since 2011. So you know, even though he cut that much weight, he's not in shape. If he's going to ever fight in MMA again, he needs to stay in a healthy weight. Even Kimbo looked crap. And I'm reading an article. The referee who refereed that fight, Big John McCarthy, says, Big John McCarthy thoughts during the Kimbo Slice Dada 5000 fight. He said, oh my God, this thing is going all 3 rounds. John McCarthy had a look on his face during Friday night's Kimbo Slice versus Dada 5000 fight like he couldn't quite believe what he was watching. Well, you may have been right. I honestly thought it would be over within the first round, said John McCarthy, who officiated at Saturday night's WSOF World Series of Fighting 28 here in Orange County, California. And you know, when he got to the end of the first round, I thought, oh my God, this is going all 3 rounds. And then mixed martial arts official John McCarthy has forgotten more fights than even the most violent of fans have watched. And you know, John McCarthy's watched more than the hardcore fans because he's always in watching fights because he's basically the referee. And he was just pretty embarrassed that this fight went all 3 rounds. It says, I always tell them I'm going to stand them up unless you are doing something, McCarthy said. I'm telling Kimbo, do something, and he's just tired. He's not trying to punch. He's not trying to go for a submission. He's just trying to catch a breath and let time go by. This marked just the second time in McCarthy's career he had called for a stand-up from a full mount position. Other was at UFC 17 in 1998 when Jeremy Horn did nothing with a dominant position against Frank Shamrock in a light heavyweight title fight. Jeremy was tearing Frank up. McCarthy said was tearing Frank up. McCarthy said, and it gets to the point he gets full mounted and he just sits there, and Frank is underwhelmed and can't really do much. So you got to stand the fight up. And I'll say this. For everybody listening to the podcast or watching the podcast, I'll say this. For a bozo like Kimbo Slice, and why is Bellator putting these crappy fights on? you see it all over social media. This is one of the crappiest cards in MMA history. People are just looking at the main event and co-main event and going, it's the shittiest fight card ever. You know, it's ridiculous when a guy like Kimbo Slice is still looked at. He has a 6-2 record. So you could sit there and go, well, that's a good record for an MMA fighter. But people are looking at it like this. Like, well, he's a badass. He's bringing a lot of money. But even Scott Coker said at the press conference that they only had a 1-fight contract between these two guys. So will they be back? And Kimbo, they say he's going to fight in July. They're only using Kimbo for the ratings, for the money. That's it. Kimbo Slice did somewhat impress me by doing some takedowns, okay? I was not expecting any sort of takedowns, but you gotta do something. When commentators ask you, yo, how's your jiu-jitsu? And you go, oh, my jiu-jitsu game's bomb, dog. It's great. It's phenomenal. No, it isn't. Tell me what a Kimura is. Tell me what a flying armbar is. Tell me what a triangle choke is. And if you can't, you're going to go, then you don't know what you're talking about. And recently on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast, it says Joe Rogan on CM Punk, it's ridiculous for him to fight in the UFC. And it says Joe Rogan isn't a fan of CM Punk making his MMA debut in the octagon. When the UFC signed former pro wrestling Phillip Brooks, better known as CM Punk, back in 2014, there were a lot of fans outraged at the idea of a man with a no pro MMA experience making his debut in the octagon. Well, it's been literally 15 months and he still hasn't had a fight scheduled. Though he was injured, I get that. And he was now injured again. And this is on the Fight podcast when he was doing it with Boss Rutan. So you guys might want to check that out. And I'll post a link in the description so you can see it. I don't know what is going to happen with the guy. I don't understand this whole thing. Well, I also think it's ridiculous for him to fight in the UFC. I don't think he should fight I think he should fight in a small organization. Take a fight in a small organization. Build yourself up. I have always said that's what you should have happened with Brock Lesnar. It says Lesnar actually did fight once outside the UFC and beating Min-Soo Kim in K1 Dynamite. He was then signed to the organization and fought Frank Mir, which he lost. But he was dominating Frank Mir. At 37 years old, CM Punk's window for fighting is getting smaller and smaller. So hopefully he can get into the octagon with a decent performance or a decent fight. You know, there's no way that CM Punk is really ever going to fight. I don't really believe it. When you're 37, 38, 39, that's when your career is basically on the downslope. And if he wanted to do MMA, why didn't he try earlier instead of going to pro wrestling? Or is he one of those guys who finds MMA to be one of these big grand organizations and this big sport? Now they're like, well, I would have joined if it was popular when I first started wrestling. You know, he's done jiu-jitsu. We understand that. But we don't know what he's capable of doing. Because it's saying like this. If I go train mixed martial arts for a year, there's difference between training and having a guy in the cage really punching you to knock your head off. There's a difference between a guy ready to choke your ass out than a guy just putting on a lightly choke in the gym. And you got to listen to the podcast because Boss Rutan, former UFC champion, and Brock Lesnar, UFC commentator and former, Taekwondo fighter in like the early 90s or late 80s, basically know what they're talking about. And for this dude who still wants to compete, I can respect the guy who wants to compete and wants to go out there brawling and balls for all. I give the guy respect. But I don't know, man. I really don't. And people are saying, I'm going to change the subject, and people are saying that Cowboy Donald Cerrone, once he fought last night at like 170, he got muscled around, got a little beat up, but people are saying the submission was on point, but they also said the dude tapped out quickly. It looked like the submission was on pretty deep, and the dude is very underrated as a jiu-jitsu guy. Do you guys want to see him eventually try to make a run for the title at 170? He looked very good last night, like I said. Yeah, last night, Sunday. And he just got a little muscled up, but I think he will do good at this weight class if he's going to fluctuate to 170, 155. But people are saying if he fights Wonderboy Thompson, that dude's just going to smash him. It's the same thing. People are saying that there's no way that Rafael dos Anjos is beating Conor, because they say if you look at the Conor McGregor fight and the way he fought against Jose, and Jose came in with that blitz run in the beginning of the fight and he cracked him. He said that's the same thing if you look at Donald Cerrone versus RDA, and Rafael dos Anjos did the same kind of blitz but landed on Cowboy Donald Cerrone. So if he does that to Conor, will Conor be able to slip and move? Because he has very, very good foot movement, and he's devastating, and he has like a 92 or 93% knockout rate by winning his fights. That's unheard of in MMA. You're winning most of your fights by the first round brutal knockout. And if he does beat Rafael, which he does say is a bum version of Aldo, which you can look at their styles, they're very, very similar. They have that explosive Muay Thai style, and I think if he does go to 170, is Conor going to be able to hang and bang with some of these guys up there? I don't know, man. It's just hard for me to pick against Rafael in this fight, just for what he's done to Benson Henderson, Nate Diaz, and Cowboy. You know, what he did to Nate Diaz was okay, because Nate Diaz isn't a guy who does a lot of stuff besides boxing usually. And what he did to Anthony Pettis. And I'll say this, when you fight Anthony Pettis, it's easy. You can shoot in double legs, take him down. He's not the greatest when it comes to the grappling. But what he did to Cowboy was phenomenal. And what he did to Benson Henderson, I still think the Benson Henderson thing was not a justifiable stoppage, because you watch that fight and you count the seconds. It was this. It was just like a clock. Benson falls, and you count 1, 2, and Benson's back up to his feet, and the ref's like, it's done. I think it was Herb Dean, and I'm like, the fight was still going on. It wasn't a justifiable stoppage. But there's just something that tells me that Conor's going to have a hard time in this fight. There was nothing that told me that when I watched the Jose Aldo fight. I've always watched Jose Aldo, and I was like, no, Conor's just going to whoop him. And I had that in my mind. But as a dude who's been watching MMA for at least 10 years, it seems like Rafael has his number. Rafael is just going to explode on him, and we're going to have to see Conor come back from adversity. I don't know, I might be wrong, or I might be right, but I think Conor might land a devastating punch. And there is a thing that Shane Carwin said, And here's what it said. It said something similar to, you can teach a man to box, you can teach a man to punch, but you cannot teach a man how to brutally knock you out. And certain people have that brutal TKO knockout, one punch, brutal knockout. Shane Carwin was a dude who landed punches on the biggest, baddest dudes on the planet and dropped them. It's the same thing Connor's doing with these lighter weight guys. He's landing the punch not like on the stomach or the chin. He's landing right on the button. And usually if you clock somebody right on the button, they drop, and they drop hard because they're not ready for the straight punch. But as always, guys, let me know what you guys think. Will CM Punk make a debut into the octagon sometime? Will Conor McGregor win the championship at 155 and possibly go to 170? Or will he just get beat up at 155 and go back to 145? And is it right that people are saying the Kimbo Slice fight is basically crap? And some people said the end of the fight was fixed. Like it was a fixed punch, the way he got punched and he fell down. But from the medical records, they're saying Dada 5000 is in the hospital and has a cardiac arrest. So I don't believe that fight was fixed. I can see how people said the Kimbo Ken Shamrock fight looked a little weird. But this fight looked legit to me. It looked very, very amateur. It looked worse than gyms that I see. I can go to a gym right here and see two guys sparring. Look 20 times better than them. But Kimbo Slice is always that guy that intrigues people to watch. I don't know what it is about him, but you could tell he's a very humble dude. But at the end of the day, remember to rate, comment the podcast, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for stopping by and listening. I'm out.